Should we do this?
Yeah, let's do this. Hi, Michael.
Hey, Tyler.
What's going on?
Not much. Just thought I'd log in and talk to you about some music.
Oh, I'm so glad you did.
I think what would be even better is if we should just start a podcast where we talk about music.
I think that's a pretty good idea. I'd do that with you.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to This One Goes to 11. It's a podcast.
It's a podcast that Michael and I are getting running, getting it off the ground, as it were, just flapping its wings. But this is a podcast about music. Neither Michael nor I are musicians. Who are you, Michael? Who, for those listeners out there who don't know the great Michael Osinski, who are you?
Well, I'm so glad you asked, Tyler. I am a theater director, producer, adjunct professor based in Philadelphia. I've directed a bunch of stuff on stages. I directed a play in an abandoned school locker room, inspired by the film work of David Lynch. And almost everything I make is driven by sound and music in some way. I'm a big fan of putting in a dance number where it doesn't belong.
Are you ever?
I sure am. And I mean, I used to be a musician. I studied piano for like 12 or 13 years, but I don't do it professionally now. How about you, Tyler? What's your jam?
What's my deal? My deal. I'm Tyler Esselman. I'm based in Los Angeles, California at the moment, but I'm Midwest. I'm a Midwest boy. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri originally. I am a theater artist, writer, performer, and person who appreciates the outdoors. I've made a lot of theater in my day, some with you, Michael, which has been quite enjoyable and
bizarre,
as it should be. So I've made some theater with you. I've made a lot of theater in Chicago, and where I graduated from the theater school at DePaul University, formerly known as the Goodman School of Drama. If you know, you know. And that's where we met. We met there.
It's true. We did meet there. And, we like
days.
This. Did you say salad
days?
Yeah. I've never understood that expression.
I think it's from Shakespeare. I'm pretty sure.
So I guess I should know that if I'm a theater person.
Yeah, you probably should.
Shakespeare's overdone.
Says you. I believe it's from Shakespeare, but I love that term. I don't really fully understand what it means either, but I like it.
Salad day. Now I'm going to look that up after we record this episode of the pod. I'm going to look it up.
Yeah.
So maybe we should also tell you a little bit about why we created This One Goes to 11 and what it's all about. Do you want to handle that one, Tyler?
If I'm not mistaken, and if I'm not misremembering kind of the genesis of this, it was just sort of us discussing, our relationship with music and how we as humans have this tendency to rank things, and we're constantly analyzing and evaluating value or quality, and that's something that has been a hallmark of our conversation as friends and collaborators over the years. Talking about like what's the best such and such album? What's the best? Which is the best? Or is it perfect? And that led us to talking about what our perfect albums are. What a perfect album is. And we thought, well, I think a lot of people would have opinions on this, right?
It's true. And so I think what we're going to do is every week we're inviting a guest on to talk to us about what they believe to be the perfect album. An album so perfect, in fact, that 10 out of 10 just is not good enough. Hence the title, This One Goes to 11. But it's also a Spinal Tap reference. If you know, you know.
Right.
For this episode, though, we thought that we would talk about one of our perfect albums. Since it's our first episode that we're making, we thought it would be good for you to get to know a little bit about one of us. And And a quick little disclaimer, dear listener, if you haven't listened to the album that we will cover in each of these episodes, that's fine. We might make references to specific songs or lyrics that you might not be familiar with, but when you listen to the album later, should you choose to listen to it, hopefully you'll remember some things. And if you have listened to the album, that's also great, because you probably have your own opinions or memories of the album, and I'm sure that will, as we talk further about it, it'll conjure up some of those memories, because that's actually a big thing that we want to do with this podcast, is rather than have it be us debating all of the like nerdy elitist nuances of music, we're more interested in people sharing the stories behind the albums, what brought them to the album, why they love it so much, if there's specific memories they have of listening to it or people that it reminds them of, that sort of thing. Yeah. Did I miss anything, Tyler?
No, that's right. I mean, because to me, and I think, not to speak for you as well, but I think that's the most interesting thing about art is the space in between us, the listener, the audience member, and the actual thing, the actual act happening. So why not create a space in which people can share that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we're not really defining the word perfect for people either. Mm-mm. So when they come on, they'll talk more about what that means for them and if there's certain standards that they have for these albums. Because right. I mean, let's be real. There's no such thing as perfection.
Well, you can't tell them that. That ruins the conceit of the podcast, Michael.
Well, we're living in a postmodern society, Tyler, so I can be both right and wrong at the same time, all right?
I guess. Okay. All right, I'll let that one slide, but you can't tell them those secrets.
Okay, I won't.
But yeah, I would agree with you. That's the fun, is we'll never tell you what perfect is.
Yeah. Well, maybe once we will. I'm just thinking ahead, dear listeners, because we've already recorded some episodes. So just, a little preview.
Just you wait and see.
Oh, yeah. Or hear.
Mm-hmm.
It's a podcast. They're seeing with their ears.
Yep.
So to get this started, Tyler, what album hath thou brought before the This One Goes to 11 tribunal?
Your Honor, the Right Honorable Michael Osinski, I have brought one of my favorite albums of all time. I might even say it might be my favorite album, period, of all time. It might be my heart album. And it is In Rainbows by Radiohead, parentheses, 2007, parentheses.
I'm a little familiar, and I know a little bit about this one.
You heard of that band?
I've heard of them, I think.
Yeah.
I think we will now be contractually obligated to mention Radiohead in every single episode that we record from here on out. So
until we get them on here.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because I'm sure that's going to happen.
Hey, never say never.
Never say never.
Never.
Indeed.
But that's what I got. It's In Rainbows today, and I think I have a pretty strong case for why this is a perfect album based on my highly scientific criteria. I know that our judging system will be very scientific, dear listener. It will be extremely objective and have no leaks, or it will be watertight.
Oh yeah. I mean, the rubrics that we have created are
we've got binders full of rubrics.
Too soon. Right.
So we got. I think my case is pretty strong, but in most weeks I'll be tabulating. I'll be tabulating the case that our listener makes. So this will be a little bit. I'll be tabulating basically your assessment of how what my case is.
That sounds good. Yeah,
for today, right?
Yeah, you can keep the record. All occasionally we'll pause to reflect on the knowledge thou hath dropped, and assess where your case stands.
Good. I think that sounds like a good plan. So before we do that, before I start making my case, though, I think we should introduce the listener to a feature that will be on every episode of this podcast, which is the beginner's guide to insert the name of album title and artist here. So it's in 60 seconds. one of us each episode is going to give you a recap of not only the artist in general that we'll be speaking about, but touching a little bit on this specific album. Just so if you've never heard of them before, or if you've only heard of them before and don't have any context for who they might be and the time in which they're making music, we'll be able to bring you up to speed just a little bit in 60 seconds. But I'll get to assess your 60-second recap today, right, Michael?
This is true. I'm gonna be the guinea pig, the canary in the coal mine, the I don't know. I can't think of another idiom right now, but that's what I got.
It'll come to you.
Yeah. I'm afraid I might go over on this one because to try and condense Radiohead and In Rainbows down into 60 seconds, but that's the challenge. That is the challenge.
Nothing worth doing was ever easy. I guess.
That's true.
Maybe. Or something like that. Okay,
something like that.
Are you ready?
Yeah, I guess so.
All right.
Okay.
Here is The Beginner's Guide to Radiohead and In Rainbows in 60 seconds. 3, 2, 1, go.
Colin and Johnny and Ed and Phil and Tom, aka Radiohead, got their start in Oxford in 1985, back when they were known as On a Friday. Initially inspired by bands like Pixies, The Smiths, Talking Heads, and R.E.M., the band got their big break when the song Creep, off their first album Pablo Honey, found its way into the MTV Buzzbin and all over modern rock radio. Their follow-up album, The Bends, led many to claim Radiohead as Britain's next big rock band. But with 1997's OK Computer, the band found electronic sounds better capture their own feelings of fear and alienation. Their influences shifted to everything from Charles Mingus and Miles Davis, to German experimental rock band Can, to Polish composer Krzysztof Penderecki. And by the time Kid A came out, there was barely a guitar on the album. In 2007, the band's seventh and arguably sexiest album, In Rainbows, marked both a maturation and a return to form for the band with a lush blending of guitars, strings, and electronica. Notably, the band released the album on their own via their website with little notice, with a pay-what-you-want model allowing fans to access the album for free if they so chose, which makes the band basically the same as Beyonce. I need to get my final sentence in there.
How much more do you have? Give us the coda.
That's good. Because we can talk about the thing at the end there. I was going to mention about what they've been up to recently, but we can cover that later.
We'll probably touch on that.
I'm not proud of that one. I'm not proud of that intro.
It was a hell of a task. It was a hell of a task, and I think you rose to it for sure. Was it perfect?
I really don't think it was.
Let's say it was a little short of perfect, just because of as they would say on Bake Off, completing the brief. But I think there was some real turn of phrase in there. I thought you captured the spirit pretty well. Mm-hmm. And the fact that you confirmed an opinion of mine that you believe In Rainbows to be the sexiest Radiohead album, mm-hmm, definitely gives you a boost on my rating. So I'm going to give you, I'm going to give you 3 MTV bargain bins for that. I'll give you 2.5. 2.5 MTV.
Bargain bin or buzz bin?
I'm saying bargain bin. I'm saying I'm changing it to bargain bin.
Okay.
I know it's buzz bin, but you're getting the bargain bin. So 2 MTV bargain bins on the board for your valiant effort at condensing Radiohead down into 60 seconds.
Okay. I'm not proud of it. I'm not proud of it.
Don't worry, it'll get better.
Yeah.
It's the first episode.
This is true. All right, Tyler. So now that we got that chore out of the way, I'm curious to know, can you tell us a little bit about how you discovered this album?
Yes.
Just, when, where, how, why, I guess what all the W's in there.
Whither are you going with it? I would say that I probably was introduced to Radiohead just around the time that this album was coming out. And so to show my age and express the youth of me, that was my first year of high school. It was 2007. And so I was aware of Radiohead. I kind of understood what their stature was in the musical community. And I had a few friends, not really yet who listened to Radiohead at that point, but whose siblings did. One friend of mine in particular, who Andrew, his sister, I'll never forget, when we were freshmen in high school, she was going to Lollapalooza 2008, so the summer after my freshman year of high school, and that was like a mind-blowing Lollapalooza lineup. I think it was Radiohead, it was The Strokes, it was I think Kanye West was at that one. Who else? Grizzly Bear. It was maybe Green Day was there that year too.
I think I was there actually. I don't think Green
Were
Day
you
was.
at that one?
I don't think Green Day was there. I think Nine Inch Nails was there. Nine Inch Nails and Metallica were there, I think.
I mean, that's an insane lineup. Yeah, and progressively, their lineups have gotten worse over the years. IMO, but that might have been the peak. There was some real power in that lineup. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I was aware of that, and I think I just didn't really have my musical sensibility hadn't yet gone in that direction. But then by the time junior year of high school came around, that was when my friends started listening to it, and it started sort of leaking into my subconscious because they would be playing it in the car, they'd be playing it at someone's house, and I started to listen to it with some intention, and it was just, I was head over heels, the whole thing. And especially knowing that I had just missed out on seeing them for this tour, by the time my junior year of high school came around, that was disappointing. And so it's one of my, I don't have many regrets in my life, but that's one of my regrets, is that I just wasn't into Radiohead yet soon enough to make it to that show. But I've seen them a few times now, so it's good. But then with this album in particular, I just this was always the one that I connected to the most and most immediately. So I think I keep coming back to it for that reason.
Is there something specific about it that you connect to? Because I mean, I think that there is. I mean, maybe later on we'll try and better articulate what the Radiohead sound is. Like, how do you know when you've heard a Radiohead song? But I mean, I'm sure people have different explanations for that. But what about this album specifically that drew you in?
The album artwork first. That was the first thing that caught my eye, and Stanley Donwood, for those of you out there who are familiar with his relationship with Radiohead, he's the guy, he's the artist who has done all of their album artwork over the years. And there's some iconic stuff there. The OK Computer album cover is iconic in my opinion. So is Kid A. I would say all of them are so distinctive, and this one to me, with the color and the contrast and that sort of like supernova thing going on in the background, it just immediately caught my eye. And I guess it's sort of like if you're buying a bottle of wine and you're just mostly buying it because the label looks nice. It just and sometimes you get lucky. That was sort of how this ended up happening in Rainbows for me.
Yeah, I mean, when he makes the artwork for all the albums, he's usually in the recording sessions with them, which is part of why all the artwork turns out so distinct for each album, because he creates something. I think he actually, for this album, was making something else, and then when they started recording, he was like, "Oh no, this is not what I was using before. It has nothing to do with this. I gotta make a change." Right.
And it's so cool that they've really embraced. One of the things that I appreciate about learning more about their whole kind of like arc as a band is how much they've embraced digital, digital art and just like digital mediums for their music. And he's somebody who's really embraced that too, like releasing concept artwork as on their website as things have gone on over the years. It makes it a really holistic experience to experience these albums in that way.
Yeah, it's a little Gesamtkunstwerk, if you know the Wagner term for total work, like everything about it. It's not just the music they're releasing, but the visuals have to go along. They always accompany whatever the sound is.
Yeah, totally.
Which does sort of make for, I mean, people who, I think being a Radiohead fan means you are waiting. First of all, you're waiting for every album to come out. But then second of all, once the album does come out, you're poring over the artwork and like all the artifacts that get released alongside of it. I mean, I don't know how long it took me before I realized that in their Kid A album, that if you pulled off where the CD is, if you pulled off the casing, there was a whole other insert of artwork in that CD that people didn't even know existed until someone like pried it off and discovered that there were actually 2 booklets in that CD. Just one was hidden.
Whoa. Okay, that I didn't know. And also I have yet to own a physical copy of this album. Is something interesting. I'm pretty sure it was given to me on a flash drive in high school. And then because I was, obviously since I wasn't around I wasn't a fan yet for the release. I was alive, but I just wasn't a fan yet. The whole, this, one of the reasons this album is notable is that they released it in a pay what you can form online, which was the first notable, the first major band to do that. And it's a fascinating factor of this album's story and has had wide ranging implications for the music industry in general, I think.
Yeah, so I remember the moment. It was pretty crazy because
how much did you pay?
It was either $6 or $7 I paid, which I think good. I found out later on they think was about the average that people paid. They never released full statistics, other than I think to say that pretty much the amount that they made from this was the equivalent of what they would have made minus like what the record company would have taken, since they released it by themselves.
Yeah.
But I mean, we're talking, I think they announced like 5 days before it was going to be released, or like a very short amount of time. They were suddenly like, hey, there's this album, be ready to pay for it. And, it was 2007. So, we didn't, the way music was being distributed.
People were still buying a lot of physical mediums.
Yeah. And there wasn't like a proper structure in place. I remember people like the idea of downloading music and it was a very confusing process to try and get the album, but it was just incredibly rewarding when you got it, because it felt similar to, actually going out and buying the album, which nobody does anymore. So, so you were not a fan when all that happened. You came to the album after it had been released.
I did. Yeah. That was a few years before I kind of, really started listening. And so knowing that now and like looking at that in the context of, how we listen to music now, it's almost like it was sort of the harbinger of another shift, because I would say that there was a shift, in the scene that they're involved in. Kid A represented a big shift for them. And then I think In Rainbows represented another career shift. Those to me seem to be like the two turning points for them as a band so far. And I think that has a lot to do with, Kid A was leaked. Kid A was leaked online, and that was one of the first big high profile rock bands to have the album leaked on time. It was right around the time Metallica and Napster were going at it. And so that context makes it seem like, we were shifting away. We were shifting away from that sort of traditional consumption of music. And then, and it also had an implication for what, should we be commodifying music? It opened up all these kinds of questions. And I think, things that I had never thought about before. And that was something I appreciated, that I could see the art in the decision to make this a pay what you can album, because it wasn't a perfect statement, but it was an artistic statement that went along with the actual art that they made. And it was political, and it's exciting. And so all of that sort of in reading about it afterwards, it was very, it made my love for this album a lot fuller, because I could see what it meant outside of itself as well.
Yeah. Their record company, well, they were just finishing up their deal with the record company. You can read about it if you want, dear listeners, but there's a whole thing about how it was
complicated.
Yeah. And the record company accused them of asking for a ton of money, and Radiohead said like, no, we actually just wanted to be able to control our masters. Yeah. And they were like, yeah, and your masters are worth a ton of money. And it's a whole,
and look at what Taylor Swift is dealing with now. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's like, I guess they would probably call those record companies legacy, just like how they call big media companies legacy media now, right? Maybe those record companies are sort of like a legacy element of the industry now. It seems there's a lot, or it's a whole lot more open. which is something I appreciate about the values. You could see the values of Radiohead in a move like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't agree with everything that every kind of take they've ever had. I don't find them to be faultless, but I appreciate the candor for sure.
So, beyond the artwork for the album, which if you haven't seen it, dear listeners, it sort of looks. It's arguably their prettiest artwork. I think. I mean, it's like it represents the title quite well. There is multicolor. It sort of looks to me like I don't know if the Big Bang were pretty, or like if a huge like planetary explosion, like the sort of like colorful gases and whatnot that would emit from something like that. I mean, that's my interpretation.
Solar flares, kind of lava.
Yeah. I mean, and again, that's one interpretation, because I feel like they never really explain what their art is.
Right.
But after that, I mean, are you a lyrics guy or a music guy? Which drew you in next?
The music first. I definitely come to the lyrics second, which I've always sort of had a little bit of shame about in the way that I listen to music, because I'll have friends or family who the lyrics are the thing. They're like, can you believe what they're saying right there? And sometimes I'll be like, I haven't even really gotten to the lyrics yet with this song. I feel like I'm trying to get into it in another way. But I have another friend who, Eric, Eric, who writes musicals. He's a musical playwright, and he said it really, really in a really lovely way one time when he said we were talking about some musical. I can't remember which one it was, and he was saying, "Well, you don't really need the lyrics right away. You can just come to them in your own time." I'm paraphrasing there. But he says, just because you're not, interacting with the lyrics yet, doesn't mean that you're not fully experiencing it. You're just kind of growing into it. And he said, they'll be there for you when you're ready. And I think about that all the time, because I feel that way with a lot of albums where I'm kind of just feeling, it's almost like a physical sensation first, where you're sort of feeling the album, feeling the music. And then after that, deciphering the lyrics to whatever degree seems appropriate.
And I mean, especially with a Radiohead song, deciphering feels like the right verb to use in the lyrics. I mean, assuming that you can, I mean, Radiohead is a band of the 90s, so they do still have that sort of, fast and loose with pronunciation, like at times. But also when you do actually look into what the lyrics are, sometimes it opens up an entirely new puzzle that you have to solve because there's not, Thom isn't really writing lyrics in a straightforward, overt way. I mean, it's not, he's not a Carole King. He's not a James Taylor. He's not, and it's not, nor I think is he ever really trying to be.
Right. And I think if you said that to him, he would be like, no, I like I say, like I know him, just somebody who's tried to listen to as many interviews as possible of a person. But I feel like if you said that to his face, he'd be like, well, of course not. Like I'm not, like that's not, I could never write those songs. I could never write a James Taylor song. I just write the song I know how to write. And that's also something that notion has informed my creative work over the years. Absolutely. Because it's like a constant reminder, right? It's a constant reminder of, oh yeah, just make the authentic thing. Just figure out how you can make the authentic thing, and then let it find its audience. Let it find the people who it will connect with. And I think it's one of the things lyrically about this album, though, is I think they're actually pretty decipherable relative to maybe.
On this album, definitely.
Yeah, relative to Kid A for sure, and relative to Amnesiac.
Well, I mean, on the song Kid A, you would have no idea what he's even saying. So there's that.
Yeah. So I think once I got to the lyrics on this one, I've listened to this in a few eras. I've listened to this album during a few different eras of my life now, and I think it was sort of during the second era it was during the college years that the lyrics started to really make a lot of sense for me. and it was a time where I was figuring out how to live emotionally in the world as a person. And so it was sort of like that was the time that I was ready to come to the lyrics on this album. And I do think I kind of have an argument that this is a breakup album. Like it might be In Rainbows might be a very good breakup album, is my take, or is one of my takes.
I've never listened to it that way. I think I would be more inclined to say that their next album is a breakup album, but I don't know the exact chronology of the Thom and the other members of Radiohead, which is not to say that when you make an album that you are definitely reflecting on your own personal things, because arguably every song you write, the speaker and in every poem that you write is not always you. But at the same time,
important distinction.
Yeah, I mean, it's an important distinction, but also at the same time, on their previous album, Hail to the Thief, he wrote a song called Sail to the Moon, which was written for his son, Noah, and there's a line within there about building an ark. So, sometimes the personal finds its way into things, no matter how fictitious you try to make it. So,
and I think it's that I think if you go down to building blocks of just doing something creative, like he's basically saying that the lyrics will matter when they do, and the lyrics won't matter when they won't. And I'm never going to tell you when that is. And it's just sort of up to you to decide based on the context around it. That's the journey you're going to have to go on if you choose to enter into this album.
And it's for the listener to sort of make meaning of things. I feel like so often when I'm teaching something that's a lot more experimental, most students, whether they watched it or listened to it, they'll just sort of go like, I don't like it. Like, I don't understand. And I'm like, well, that might be because you have to, you can't just take it in as it is. You have to do some work to sort of put the pieces together, and you make meaning of it yourself. I mean, as human beings, we're meaning makers, where you see two images next to each other, and you make a story. There might be two seemingly disparate lines in a Radiohead song that, Thom didn't pick out a particular reason why those two lines are next to each other, but when they are next to each other, you deduce something from that. I mean, I would venture to say that maybe like a fifth of all Radiohead songs were crafted by them just sort of putting a bunch of phrases next to each other that they found, found text, essentially.
I have it on good authority that is how that was the lyrical process for Kid A.
Oh, on good authority, because you talked to your buddy Thom before this podcast. Is that what happened?
Yeah, I was texting with Johnny. But I remembered what I was going to say. I had another little pull quote from one of the band members that related to this, because especially as we've seen their work evolve over the years. Johnny, I read in an interview, Johnny Greenwood, the lead guitarist, he said one time, he's like, well, Radiohead can't really make just a free jazz album. They can't make they couldn't make a good jazz record because that's not the record they know how to make. Which is so interesting, because now you see them sort of bringing in those other influences and sort of working with genre a little bit more at this later stage in their career. And so it's nothing to say that like imitation is not part of what they do too. Like they try a lot of different tools, which I respect about them as artists.
Yeah, and I know Johnny Greenwood has also, spoken overtly about his influences too. I mean, they just, like all great artists, they steal. Like they just know how to steal well.
Right. That's what you got to do.
I think might not be a bad time for us to listen to a track off In Rainbows. So, Tyler, what have you chosen as the standout track for this album?
Standout track. This was tough. This was tough after I immediately knew which song I had to there was always going to be one song for me on this album that is the standout, and that's saying something since it's strong all the way through. But my pick for standout track from In Rainbows is Weird Fish's Arpeggi, and it illustrates an important point of how I also came to understand this album, which was with YouTube videos of live performances of different songs, was very much how I first started to consume In Rainbows. And I'll never, if you want to go see a great Radiohead performance on YouTube, look up Radiohead, Weird Fishes, Jules Holland. That's Jools, Holland, like the country. And that is the one, I get goosebumps every time I watch it, because I just remember being 17 years old and hearing that. And you just sort of knew, right? You just sort of knew that that song was meant for you, that there was a string run through that song that was just for me. And so this is one of my favorite songs of all time, Weird Fishes, Arpeggi.
All right, let's give it a listen.